Welcome to Tech and Thrive, where we explore the intersection of technology, well-being, and performance. Our goal is to uncover the stories of pioneers and entrepreneurs who are not only shaping the future of tech, but also prioritizing balance, creativity, and purpose along their journey. My name is Kimia.
And I'm Kiana. And today we're thrilled to be joined by Max Lungarella, a techno-realist, scientist, engineer, and CEO of ddrobotec, a Swiss-based company pioneering physical AI at the intersection of robotics, cognitive health, and high-performance training. Max's work blends human physiology, personalization, and intelligent machines, helping redefine how we think about movement, recovery, and longevity in the 21st century. Max envisions a future where individual health, functional independence, and well-being can be sustained throughout life.
Welcome, Max.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And we already started a little bit talking to you. Actually, I feel like we've already started talking for at least 10 minutes before. It's already been so many great insights, so we really had to press the record button. We're actually also, for the first time ever, are in a new podcast studio. We're at headquarters in Zurich, and they have been so kind to sponsor a couple of our episodes. So really excited to be here. It's also a beautiful studio. Maybe next time you will actually see it on camera as well. So Max, maybe let's jump right in. Let's talk a little bit about your background and also your journey into science and tech. Can you walk us through your early career? What were the key turning points that brought you to AI and specifically also robotics?
Sure. But let me first say a couple of words about the podcast name, which I think is really great, Tech and Thrive. And it somehow aligns a little bit with my life credo. You know, I'm an optimist. I think there is lots of things to be optimistic about. But I think I have a sort of a realistic angle on tech. And I think this sort of summarizes it, what you're doing here. So there is I think the angle of using tech for good. And that's why I think it's a great name. I'm super happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So the name found you, or you found us, and we're super lucky to have you. I mean, the first time we heard you speak was at the HSLU industry event, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, we already got in touch before your speech, but then also your speech was so inspiring. And also, I was never too much into robotics. I mean, our mother, she is like a super nerd. So when we were small, we used to build robots together.
Yeah,
wow.
she had
like the Lego ones, you know. So we had them walking around our house. And so that's like my last touch point, I think, with robotics. But then obviously, Kiana, I feel like in your studies, you had a little bit more touch points, right?
Yes, in my last semester, we had robotics too. It was quite diverse, but still it felt that we didn't even digged. We only were kind of scratching the surface, but it was already feeling that we've been going into the depths, even though it's probably just the beginning.
Yeah, I remember also from your speech, Max, you showed a slide, and I think you showed the curriculum of the AI study program that Kiana's enrolled in. And then you also mentioned that there's not too much.
There was one little box out of maybe 30 boxes.
Yeah.
But that's coming now. I mean, I guess the CEO of Figure AI once framed it properly. I forget his name now. And he said that robotics is sort of the ultimate implementation vector for AI. Which I agree with. And if you look at history of an AI and robotics, robotics comes in a way as a concept a bit before, but they were always somehow coupled. And but robotics is, in my view, much more difficult, as we will try to illustrate during this podcast. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back maybe to myself, my early career. Well, I was born in Switzerland, actually at the border between Canton Aargau and Canton Luzern. For the listeners, these are two totally different cantone. My house was essentially on the border, and so I was very lucky to be able to go to school in both cantoni, but eventually ended up going to Canton Luzerne to high school. I was quite a nerdy kid, I would say, and I was rather good at everything that is now called STEM, mathematics, engineering, technology, chemistry. And one day, I remember, I was 15, one of the teachers, Mr. Bartolome, he was my chemistry teacher. He says, Max, after the class, you have to come, I have a present for you. I said, what the hell? So I go to the back room, and he had his chemistry lab. He was actually a PhD student at DTH at the time also. He was a high school teacher, but a PhD student. And he said, you have to read this book. And it was a book by Steven Weinberg. He's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist with the title First 3 Minutes. Super fantastic title. And essentially tells the story about the first 3 minutes of the universe. So as a teenager, I read that like in 2 days. And I thought like, wow, this is amazing. And this sort of started my career, but my passion, lifelong passion for physics was my first, I would say, in the field of STEM, my first love. I became quite good at it, I would say. And so with the money I was earning, working on Wednesday afternoons, for the listener again, Wednesday afternoons typically people in Switzerland don't go to school. And coming from a relatively poor family, I had to work to earn money to buy stuff I wanted. So I had enough money to buy books about physics, mostly popular science, but I ended up buying the trilogy written by Richard P. Feynman, one of the key figures in the modern history of physics. And so I was reading that as a nerdy, maybe 16-year-old. And my mother, she didn't know what I was doing, but she saw the title physics. So at that time, she was the cleaning lady of the mother of a physics professor at the University of Basel. And she was cleaning the room of the son, and then she saw physics. My son is reading something like that. So she told the lady, and the lady said, look, my son doesn't need these books anymore. Just take them with. And so my mother came home with a box of books, and one of them was the book by by Douglas Hofstadter, nowadays called Geb, or Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is essentially a book about AI, about cognitive sciences, about music. It's a very weird book, and I would say not many people have understood the book, including myself, but it was a very interesting and engaging book to read. So I thought, wow, this is really super cool. And I was deep into mathematical puzzles, so I had got a book by Martin Gardner on, The Game of Life by John Conway. It's essentially about cellular automata. And there were books about fractals. So I made some idea about the computer, and I started implementing this stuff. So the first program I ever wrote that I have memory of was actually basically implementing the Apfel. It's called the Apfelmännchen in German. It's basically the famous picture of a fractal, which looks a bit weird. And
is it Mandelbrot?
Yeah, it's a Mandelbrot fractal, Benoit Mandelbrot. That's the name of the guy who basically generated that picture in the 60s or 70s maybe. And so this started my passion for AI and, let's say, artificial intelligence, but also artificial life. My love for robotics came a bit later. So for various reasons, my family decided to go away from Switzerland when I was 19. I wanted to study physics, but it was not possible. So I became sort of a working student. I ended up studying electrical engineering and was working at the university library. And one day I was putting back books that other students had returned. And one book stuck out. It was a book by Anita Flynn entitled Mobile Robots. And typically in the 1990s, books about robots were quite dry, I would say. Lots of formulas and kinematics and holonomics. And it's like a lot of math and mechanical stuff. It's not really fun. Mm-hmm. But that book was really fun because it was describing robots that were very, very simple to build with very simple CPUs, an 8086 a CPU or a small microcontroller, quite affordable. I said, wow. So I went to the photocopier and I copied the whole book page by page. And I read it in 2 days and said, that's what I want to do. So I was looking for professors at the university to help me fulfill my dreams, but nobody really understood what I wanted. And eventually became the first robotics student of the University of Perugia ever.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really just
When was that?
That was in 1998. They didn't have a robotics curriculum at that time. And so I pushed a few professors until one of the guys said, "So just do whatever you want." So, and they said, "Yeah, do you have any robots anywhere in Italy?" I said, "Yeah, you have to go to Rome." So at the time I was living in Toscana, so I started going to Rome once a week by car. I had a very crappy little car. But I ended up repairing the robots more than working with robots. So I told them, look, I won't work because I will never be able to finish my thesis. So I said, what do you want then? I'll write a simulator. So I basically wrote a simulator for robots. That was in 1998. And nowadays, of course, simulation, thanks to NVIDIA, has become a real big thing in robotics. And the whole movement, sim to real to sim, with all the tools that NVIDIA is developing, is becoming as boomed, and it's really reaching a so-called popcorn moment. And yeah, that was
maybe for the audience, can you quickly explain simulation?
Exactly. So essentially, if you build robots, as Rodney Brooks, one of my big heroes and one of the greatest roboticists of all time, a GOAT, once stated, the real world really crystallizes the hard issues. Building robots is really difficult because robots, these are machines. At the moment, they are still tools. And like every machine, they tend to break down. The world itself is not an ideal place. There are changing lighting conditions which fool your vision sensors. There are echoes which fool your auditory, your microphones. Robots don't really have yet the sense of touch. So it's very complicated. So it's much easier to make a simulator that you can cheat. So most of the simulator have essentially two purposes. One, to visualize your robots moving in a certain environment, say a room or a house. And the second one is to simulate physics, which of course is much harder. So it's, in a way, and that was one of the big achievements of Rodney Brooks in the 1980s, essentially the best simulation of the world is the world itself. So it's, in a way, sometimes easier to build a robot than to simulate it. And I believe now that the trajectory is towards physical artificial intelligence. This was what will happen, although at the moment there is a lot of money which is being invested in making simulators.
It sounds super interesting because I'm actually preparing for my upcoming exams next week about reinforcement learning. And we've also been touching on dynamic programming and kind of create the environment first in order for the agent to think through all the scenarios, for example, to bring a coffee from the kitchen to the living room to a guest. And I think it was quite interesting that with the help of simulations, you can map out all the interiors, but still it would never be, I think it's almost impossible to kind of just take this into the real world. I've also seen a video of, I think it was DeepMind, that has been training a helicopter, like a small helicopter where nobody was inside, to do like tricks in the air. And I think they also made a simulation about it first, and then they tested it out in the real environment.
Yeah, that's definitely an approach which will gain lots of momentum. I believe that's actually the right way to go.
It's much cheaper as well, right?
Cheaper,
if you
faster.
Don't have to build everything out and then test it in the real world.
It's cheaper, faster, it's more accessible for more people. Not everybody is a mechatronics engineer. So you'll have maybe lots of software engineers which feel more confident in using a computer and not a robot which has cables and it breaks, and sometimes you see some magic smoke when things burn. But just a quick thought also on why robotics and AI became my career, because of course I ended up reading this book, and what happened And I think this is important for what comes afterwards. What happened is that at that time I was in Italy. I was a poor student, and I read this book by Ronnie Brooks, and I said, where in the world can I actually, study this stuff that is written in this book? Of course, no way I can go to MIT because it's super expensive. Ronnie Brooks was a professor at MIT at that time. He's the co-founder of the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. He's now a professor emeritus. And just by pure luck, and this is again why life sometimes is there are some discontinuities. At that time, I was emailing with a friend of mine from Switzerland, and this friend of mine was attending a class by Professor Dr. Rolf Pfeiffer, who was one of the superstars of AI in the 1990s and 2000s in Switzerland, here in Zurich. And he said, you should really definitely contact Pfeiffer. He might have a position for you. I said, what shall I tell him? And this friend of mine, Roger, he just sent me essentially the script of the lecture. It was just a script, which eventually became a book entitled Understanding Intelligence. And I read the script in 2 days. I said, this is phenomenal. I said, but you will never hire me. And then I just said, okay, but I can still send him an email. So I sent him an email, and he invited me for an interview. So I came to Zurich it was September 99, I remember, and I totally messed up the interview because I didn't know what to expect. I like to jump in the cold water sometimes, like this podcast. And because I think this makes you, these experiences you'll remember. If everything is planned, then it's sort of boring. But I mean, sometimes you just do something which is outside of the ordinary, and this will stick with you for the whole life. So I went there, I messed up totally the interview. But they gave me a tour of the lab, and I had studied every single project that they had at the lab before going to visit them. I knew the website by heart, and everybody was super great, super intelligent people from different fantastic universities from Australia, from the UK, from the United States. There was a lady from the MIT who had studied with Ronnie Brooks, my superhero. There was a guy who had studied at Sussex, at that time one of the meccas of artificial life and artificial intelligence. So I knew everything. And so they gave me the tour, and everybody, this guy knows a lot about my project. And then I went back to the room, and it was the last question of the interview. But Max, do you want to build robots? And they said, Rolf, that's why I came here. And that you're hired. Because nobody wanted to build robots. So that's the point about simulation and robotics. Most of the PhD students probably choose the easier path, because simulating stuff is a bit easier, I would say. You can recompile your code. If you have a bug, you recompile it many times as you want until the bug is fixed. But if your robot breaks and, say, a motor burns, you'll have to disassemble it and reassemble it and do all your experiments again. And maybe your experiments are wrong because the sensor was mounted in a wrong way. So eventually end up losing much more time. So it's not an attractive proposition for a PhD student to become a robotics PhD student or a PhD using robots. And so most of PhD students choose sort of the easier path. And this was, of course, a problem for Rolf Pfeiffer at that time, because he was one of the key figures in the movement called embodied artificial intelligence. And the idea of embodied artificial intelligence, there are a few ideas, but one of the key ideas is to understand the brain or intelligence by building things. And, you build them in the real world. That's the ultimate proof that something is actually intelligent, because humans or animals or other organisms, they are embedded in the real world. So that's what I ended up doing. It became from a passion. I went from AI, artificial life, to robotics. And then it became a real profession because I did my PhD thesis at the Artificial Intelligence Lab of the University of Zurich. And then, of course, because of Rolf's fame, it opened up the whole world. Because I managed to meet Ronnie Brooks. I would consider him a friend. I even have a book by him which is signed with his signature. And I met all the superstars. So it was really, really amazing for me.
That's super interesting. I love the way that you talked about your whole path, like starting with the book that you read and starting to read more books about physics, and then going into doing your first code and looking at fractals. I was also super inspired when I was reading about fractals as well back in the days, and I was looking into all the applications of it. How the first one of the first Star Wars movies, or the fourth one, the simulation of the mountains was made by fractals, and I think Unreal Engine and everybody these days to generate games, for instance, or animations, there's always fractals in play, and you see it everywhere in the world. You see it in our veins, you see it in our body, and you see it, of course, in physics and in the virtual world as well. And it's super, super interesting.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now we learned a lot about your initial path into AI and robotics, but as we know, you also have quite the interest in neuroscience, and then obviously also movement and technology. So can you tell us a little bit about how that came about? What sparked your interest in these areas?
Well, I mean, it was essentially, I was exposed to this concept of embodied artificial intelligence, and that's, I would say, a very interdisciplinary type of approach to understanding the brain or intelligence itself, without defining it, by the way. It's very hard to define intelligence. And of course, if you can, the one key aspect of embodied AI is that there is a brain, there is a body, and there is an environment, and all of these things are coupled to each other. And so you end up working with neuroscientists, you end up working with movement scientists, you end up working with computer scientists, with robotics engineers. And essentially, eventually, you decide in which direction to go. And at that time, I was very much fascinated about the brain itself, about the so-called sensory motor interactions of intelligent organisms with the world. And as I was mentioning before, I met Olaf Sporns. He's a super renowned computational neuroscientist. And so I ended up doing a few years of work in the field of neuroscience, but the computational aspects. And yes, and then of course from there you move on, and of course there are robots that have different body shapes. And in Japan, where I worked for a while, I was lucky enough to work in a lab of one of the champions of humanoid robotics, Yasuo Kuniyoshi. And in my room, I had humanoid robots, and one of the tasks of humanoid robots, apart from the fact that they should look like a bit like humans, they have 2 legs and 2 arms and a torso and a head. They have to walk, they have to move, and this, of course, connects then to movement science, because there is always a lot of inspiration from nature, and this approach is called bioinspiration or bioinspired engineering. So you always look at nature, look at animals, and you try to extract some principles and try to then make robots that sort of implement these principles. And that's why you start looking at, books about movement science, you start looking at books about developmental psychology, how do babies learn stuff. And so in a way it was very broad what I was doing. In a way it's everything is sort of, you do a bit of everything, but nothing really deep. Which sort of, maybe some people don't like it. For me, it was fun because I learned a lot about different subjects. And I guess it became one of my superpowers. If I think now also of starting companies and stuff like that, I can relatively quickly absorb new subjects. I don't really fully understand everything, but I get quite easily to 50 or 60%. As long as it's STEM. I'm not good at music and art and stuff like that, but as long as there is mathematics or there is engineering and there is a CAD drawing somewhere, I feel confident that I can learn that stuff quickly. And I think this is because of the way I was educated. Because, if you work with a psychologist, you need to learn a little bit about psychology is, otherwise you can't talk to them. And it's fun. I really enjoy that, and I think that's one of the beauty of life. And generally speaking, stay curious and interested about stuff. There is so much to learn.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, if you are curious about multiple things and you can connect them together. You can create synergies between them. That's where the magic most of the time happens as well.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And so you were just telling us that you were in Japan. And then when was it that you founded your company, ddrobotec?
So I was in Japan. I had actually a good life there. My contract was still, I think, would have lasted for another 10 years. I worked for Sony. I mean, I was in Tokyo, which is one of the most craziest cities in the world.
It's my favorite city in the world.
It never sleeps. You have
Yeah.
everything is super clean. It's super safe. People are actually friendly. Services work. It's really great. But I didn't feel fulfilled, mostly because of my looks. I don't look like a Japanese. And so at the time I was deep into education. And so the idea was that I would come back and basically take over a lab. But then I realized that actually my real passion is not in education. I like educating small groups of people, but I don't like educating large group of people, because in larger groups you always have lots of people not interested in what we're talking about. And that annoys me deeply. And so I ended up basically working with a friend of mine who already had a company. And then I realized that actually these are I really like. I like solving real problems. I'm quite good at it. The difference from science is that in customers, when they pay money, they really care that the stuff you deliver really works. Because if it doesn't work, they'll complain. And I thought it was kind of cool. That was sort of when I started working in this company, and eventually I got integrated, and I got shares for my work. It's so-called sweat equity, and that was sort of the beginning of Dynamic Devices, essentially, where I work right now. And at Dynamic Devices, I could sort of realize a few of my dreams. On the one hand, work with robots. There is a lot of bio-inspired artificial intelligence, which goes into building these robots. But at the same time, you make stuff that is useful for people. We are into healthcare, sports. We make machines that make people move, that are fun to use. They include data science. There is a lot of math behind making these systems. And we are a bit contrarians, because we try to go with actuators which are not very much used in the world of robotics. We use so-called artificial muscles, which was also fun. It was an engineering challenge. And I think, as far as I know, we are one of the few companies in the world which is using these artificial muscles to make machines to help people recover from injuries or from pathologies. And so that connects movement, that connects the neuroscience aspects of movement, that connects embodied AI with robotics, with engineering. So it's kind of a nice ride.
Amazing. So can you give us an example of how ddrobotec's technology has made a real impact on someone's life?
Well, we have a few. Essentially, our patient zero, if I can call her like that, Barbara, essentially she has a disease you can't heal. It's a neuropathy. And this is a disease where the peripheral nerves in your body, which are responsible, for example, for feedback, say from your feet or your fingers, they basically get damaged. And in her case, they didn't know why. Neuropathies are sometimes the result of diabetes, so it's a quite widespread problem. I think 2.5% of the population suffers from neuropathy. In her case, they didn't know. Her luck was that her son was working at Didi at that time. And she came and said, Fabian, this is really cool. Can this help me? Because she was on heavy medications. At that time, she was 60, looked like 80. She had lost, joy of life. we didn't know. I mean, we said, I did some research. I was mentioning before, I'm quite quick at, basically understanding stuff. Said, maybe it can work. I mean, there is definitely no counterindication. She's overweight. She was like 110 kilo, BMI of 35 or 36. Let's try. In the worst case, she loses a bit of fat, which is definitely not bad. And we started essentially intervention with her using stuff we were already doing with athletes, and it worked really, really well. In the sense that after 2 months, she could walk again quite well without crutches. And the big thing was when she sent us a video of her over Christmas, New Year, and she could climb again the stairs. She had like a Wendeltreppe, I don't know how that's called in English. A staircase, very steep staircase at home. And because she was living in a 3-floor flat. And the super amazing thing, she was able to climb a ladder again. And then she kept doing with the training, and she said that sometimes she would forget to take the medications because neuropathy is very painful sometimes. So because of the pain, she has to take painkillers, heavy painkillers, and that was amazing. So we changed essentially her life, and she basically looked younger, she felt younger, she started playing trumpet again. Of course, we didn't heal her, as it's not like we are magicians or something like that, but her quality of life, the QOL it's called, increased drastically. And this gave us enough energy to pursue essentially this path and say, okay, maybe we can really help people. And we have many kinds of this kind of stories, actually. We have stories with children, we have stories with athletes. But I think Barbara was really one of the people we could really help. And that was like, for us, very invigorating as a company. So we said, we really can make something that can help people, which I think, for me, that's what technology is about. And that makes me also a bit sad nowadays because, I think we'll talk about the resilience and that. But we are living in a world where technology sometimes is not built just to help people, but to sort of exploit them a little bit or tap into their weaknesses. And that's not the way technology should be used. But anyway, so I'm getting ahead of myself. But sort of that's one of the stories like telling. Unfortunately, we don't have a video because if you see this lady from barely being able to walk to really walking, that's amazing. And the feedback was that we had hired an actress. This is what we were hearing, yes.
Wow.
So here in Zurich, the medical community is slowly opening up, but it's a process of years, of maybe a decade. People don't really believe. If you come up with something which is sort of extraordinary, which doesn't require any medications. We are not selling supplements. We are selling an intervention. This was quite amazing for lots of people. And of course, Barbara kept working out in Bern because she was coming from Bern, and she spread sort of the word. And so we had then some of her friends who also started working out at DD. And so we sort of gained a lot of experience in helping people with diseases or problems that usually are not solved. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you guys have like stations? So do you have a stationary shop where people come by, or are you located in different hospitals, for instance?
We did that during the pandemic. We opened up our showroom for people to visit us and train. And we were actually doing very well. It can be a very profitable business. I can afterwards say why this is the way it is, but we stopped because it was conflicting essentially with our market. Because, of course, we are not physical therapists and I'm not a doctor. We are not a healthcare center. We are a company that makes robotic personal trainers for health and sport. So it's not our focus. But we tried, and it works very well. And the idea behind this is that, and I think that's the beauty of technology, it's empowering if used in the proper way. So patients are able to use our robots by themselves. See, and not only old people or, let's say, middle-aged people, but also kids. The robots are very simple to use. And And of course, this is then opens up the whole topic about, physical AI in human spaces, how close should robots be to humans. But anyway, so this empowerment leads then to people come to us because the worst thing, I think, in medicine is this asymmetry that there is. In German, it's called der Gott in Weiß, so that you go to a doctor or a physical therapist and you're depending on this person because you don't really know something is wrong with me, even if it's only your knee that hurts, but you don't really know what's going on. And then there is somebody who knows much better than you and tells you what to do. But actually, humans like to be in the driver's seat. That's called agency. And as soon as you remove that agency, it becomes sort of an asymmetric relationship, which is not exactly good and pleasurable. And I think by using robots, you can reestablish a certain level of symmetry in this relationship because the robot doesn't care. There is no emotions. It's just a machine. The robot spits out some numbers, tells you it was good, it was bad, and tells you what you have to do to improve. And if those numbers become bigger with time, something is right. And this you do, and this makes you happy. And if you are happy, you keep doing stuff. It's very simple, the feedback cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah, you touched a little bit upon physical AI, and it's gained quite a lot of traction recently, mainly also through, I think, the speeches of Jensen Huang with NVIDIA. And can you tell us how you define physical AI and then also how it kind of builds upon cognitive AI? I mean, it's basically the combination of cognitive AI and robotics, right? As we just talked about.
That's correct. So, I mean, just to start with, I say a very simple definition of AI itself. I mean, there are no officially accepted definitions of these terms, but maybe it's good just to give a sense of what it could be. So artificial intelligence is essentially the simulation of, I would say, intelligent or adaptive behavior with a computer. That's sort of what that is. And now, in the last 3 years, it has managed to jump out of the screen in a way and in the imagination of the people. So everybody talks about AI. Lots of companies now put AI on their websites. It's become a big thing for marketing. And of course, the idea now, I mean, if you mentioned Jensen Huang, so he has this famous slide where he basically starts. Of course, it's very NVIDIA-centric, but he has this slide where you see a curve which grows rapidly. It's essentially exponential. We like exponentials. And it starts essentially in 2010, 2011 with perceptive AI, what he calls perceptive AI. This was the beginning of deep learning as we know it, where they came up with this network called AlexNet, which then could classify images much better than the others, the previous one, and which was using GPUs made by NVIDIA. That's why NVIDIA-centric. So you start with perceptive AI, and recently in 2022 we had the big boom, the popcorn effects of generative AI, AI that can not only recognize or interpret images or classify images, but also generate stuff, generate text, generate code, generate music, videos. And this year should be the year of agentic AI. Yeah, that actually is not only good at generating stuff, but also doing stuff for you. It's autonomous. You can give it tasks. You can tell it to book your flight. Personally, I don't think it's working, but I mean, that's my personal opinion. I would love to. And of course, Jensen Huang then goes further. And if you look at the end of this curve, you see physical AI as the goal. And if you interpret it like this, yes, what you said is correct. So it's the idea of physical AI is to take all these things we have learned in the last now 14 years, 700 weeks. Some futurologists that I know talk about weeks, which I think is a very fascinating way of formulating because things have become very fast. You don't talk anymore in years or decades or centuries. You talk in weeks. So 700 weeks ago was AlexNet. It's not a long time. Today is Wednesday, so 700 Wednesdays to get here. It's kind of crazy. It's crazy to think about it. And physical AI, the idea is now we take this cognitive AI, which is becoming smart, we think, and basically put it in something which has a body, which can interact with and manipulate the world in which we live in. And of course, as I was mentioning before, that's the ultimate goal of AI, because we have so many things we would like these robots to do for us, but they have to be intelligent. So far, most of the robots have been confined to fenced-off spaces. I mean, lots of stuff that we buy, like cars, motorcycles, computers, iPhones, is not anymore built with the hands. Or maybe in the end there is some quality control, there are still some steps which are manual, but most of it is super automated. So there are robots which are typically rather dangerous in the automotive industry that can lift entire cars. If you look at these videos, it's nuts. They are very fast, they're very precise, they do this 24/7, 365, they don't complain, and they do it really well. But so far, these robots have been really far away from us. Most of us have never seen these robots live, I would claim. I mean, probably 99.9% of the people have never seen such a robot work live, or more even. And now these robots are coming out. So you see, always in the news, you see companies, or also in Zurich, we're becoming sort of now a robot hub. You see the drones that fly around, and then, but they're not really smart at the moment. So most of the stuff you observe is actually teleoperated. So you have to be very critical about this. And there is what Neil Lawrence, another one of my heroes, is a professor at Cambridge, calls a vaporware economy, essentially. So we need to create this vaporware because there is lots of money involved, lots of money, and you need to keep promising dreams to the investors and people who give you money. But yes, at the same time, these robots are coming out. And so the goal of physical AI is to make sure that these robots are sort of intelligent and can basically do stuff for us that is useful. And the typical example that you might be seeing in the news is the robot that cleans your table and washes the dishes. Or the robot that folds your laundry, which is fun. I mean, I think it's good. Personally, that's my opinion. I think that the approach is sort of a bit too linear. So we are taking our results of this evolution from perceptive AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI, which is sort of still inside the computers. It's very virtual, very digital. And we are hoping that these models that come out are so super general that they can be just implanted in a robot of any type of form factor, and that robot will then learn to do that task or multiple tasks. But I mean, that's sort of, not, I think, the way the nature works. I mean, organisms are highly optimized. I would claim that if I took the brain of a monkey and put it in a human, nothing good will happen. I mean, these things are so tightly coupled. The cognitive intelligence, what happens in your brain and your body are so tightly coupled that they are a result of evolution, of development. So, yeah, but that's sort of the vector at the moment in physical AI, which I think is great. I mean, there is a lot of things to be optimistic about, but I think one has to also take everything with a bit of a grain of salt. And the history of AI shows us that there are a lot of winters and a lot of summers. So summers are essentially a period in the history of AI where there is a lot of money for AI development, there is a lot of enthusiasm, there are a lot of students of AI, and the winters is exactly the opposite, where the funding dries out. People say that's bullshit, remember, it didn't work out. So, and at the moment we are in a high summer. It's super hot. 50 degree. So, and of course, this is very high on a hype cycle. And the danger for me now as a robotics enthusiast or AI enthusiast is that then because of too many people basically promising too many things which maybe are not even realistic, that then we'll end up in another super winter. And that I don't want. So I guess it's about managing expectations. And it's not the optimal thing if you're looking for money, I suppose, because as a good let's say, business person, you also sell some dreams, what will we do in 2 or 5 years. And that's always a dangerous thing to do. But anyway, so getting ahead of myself once again.
Many people sell the dream of AGI at the moment as well. And I was wondering, a computer used to take 2 million pictures for a computer to recognize a cat, for instance, while a 3-year-old human just takes one catch of a cat or maybe 2. So my question to you is as well, do you think that GPUs or the way we are creating or generating game models, or the capacity, do you think will it limit itself in the future? Because it feels like 2 million pictures to train image recognition feels like a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing. And then, of course, not to speak of the power consumption. Our brain works with 20 watts, which is a very dim light bulb. So it's essentially no power. And, these GPUs, I mean, even a cheap GPU you have at home has at least 400 watts or more. That's why I have all these big fans. Usually they have 3 fans, the one you buy for gaming. And if you go to a data center, we are talking about megawatts. I mean, in the States now have the Project Stargate, you're talking of gigawatts. I mean, this is very power hungry, this technology. And maybe it's a different way to achieve AGI. And I have the tendency, artificial general intelligence, that's also a funny concept. Because, it used to be called AI, and somebody very clever invented a new world. And it's also interesting. So if you listen to Neil Lawrence, he wrote a book, which I highly recommend, called The Atomic Human. Neil Lawrence is a professor at Cambridge. I think he has a very rational and ethical stance on AI, which I really, really like. And he says certain things, that's why this book is called Atomic Human, certain things you won't be able to take away from the human, because it's uniquely human. Humans have certain weaknesses that are unique to humans. And what he says is that AGI itself it's a silly concept. And he makes the example of the artificial general vehicle. So I came here by motorbike, and that's a motorbike. It has 2 wheels. Essentially, it's 200 kilograms heavy, but it cannot fly. And it cannot, it's not a submarine. So if I want to go to Japan, I have to take the plane. I have to take another vehicle. And of course, the dream would be to make a vehicle that can do everything for you. It can fly, it can go underwater, it can drive on a highway, it can go through the forest. If people are into mountain biking, it can go downhill. But it doesn't exist. And the same thing for AGI. That's his claim, and I agree with him. That's sort of also a silly concept.
It's basically like they want to build a stem cell, right? That can then just be whatever. But then also stem cells cannot turn back into stem cells and become another cell.
Yeah, it's very interesting, yes, this analogy. And also intelligence is very context dependent. Depending what you want to achieve, it will be something else. And it's sometimes also in the eye of the observer. So one example I could make is like, imagine I played chess with you, and I'm sort of mediocre. I'm not a good chess player, but I end up winning. But then you replace me with a 5-year-old kid who does exactly the same moves, and he ends up winning by a small margin. That kid would be probably a genius, right? But it's the same. The behavior essentially will be the same. So it's always context dependent. Who is basically, who are we observing? And there are a lot of, there is a lot of literature on ants, ant colonies or societies of animals that are really, really intelligent. But from a, let's say, definition of AGI, which again is a eugenic concept, by the way, itself. Francis Galton introduced it, and it was measured by the ability to solve mathematical puzzles. By that definition, some animals are just stupid, which is not correct. So that's why it's very hard. So and I think what will happen is that eventually we'll have a lot of specialized type of machines which will solve lots of specialized tasks, and they will work together. There will be some kind of orchestration mechanism, and that will be kind of fun to look at.
Definitely.
Star Wars has it in a way already. If you think if you have different type of robots, do different things. Many of these superstar CEOs from the United States, they're all sort of science fiction aficionados, and it's all there. So I don't think we have to make now a general purpose humanoid robot that will do everything for us. Of course, it's cool, it's catchy, and probably that's the reason why they do it, because it attracts lots of investors' money.
So what do you think about Tesla's vision of robots or humanoids?
Well, I think it's great. They have the money, they have very, very talented people, they know how to integrate things. I think at the moment, most of the humanoid companies are still looking for the use cases. That's what's lacking. And I think technologically they are there. If you look at the way these humanoids move and sometimes also run, or some videos from these companies in China, Unitree, the humanoids even fight. They can do the breakdance. It's amazing. But I think the space is still looking for good use cases. And that's still lacking, because whatever they will do, you will be able to do with a simpler robot that costs less money. And of course, a simpler robot means also less failures, because if you have more motors or more sensors, more CPUs, the likelihood that something will break is higher. So I think it's great. As I said, I'm an optimistic techno-realist. I love everything that is technology, and I would love to see one of these robots live at a certain point. But I wonder what will happen.
So I think we once had a discussion about this topic as well, but basically the idea was that one day you will not have to look after your children anymore, because there will be a robot doing it, and it will also have the ability to basically mimic maybe your smell, mimic your hormones that you extract. And yeah, is that a realistic picture?
Well, I think the question should be, is that what we want? That's really sad vision of the future, if you ask me. I hope it doesn't, very dystopian, but it's the point of having kids. If you then basically outsource their upbringing to a machine, it's kind of sad. But I don't know how easy it will be to control this stuff. That's sort of, I think there are many challenges. As an optimist, if you think of the challenges we have on planet Earth, there is economic issues, and there are climate crisis, climate stress, there is social challenges. And there is disinformation is a huge problem. What is the truth? What is not true? There is the algorithmic manipulation. And there is a lot of money to basically do this, and it's very hard for us to stay in the driver's seat. We are very lucky and very privileged to be living in Switzerland, where things sort of still work and we still can express our opinions freely. And we are the average person is educated and critical, but there are many other countries where that's not the case, or not the case anymore, and that's sort of scary. Because, you don't know what will happen, because these people are highly manipulable. And as Thomas Hobbes said many, many centuries ago, homo homini lupus, that the man is the man's wolf, or something like that. This means it's probably the most dangerous creature on planet Earth. And if you can manipulate masses, then it's not fun anymore.
I think it's also scary too that people still believe that just one person could solve a nation's all its problems. That's yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I think, that is sort of also, I'm going a bit off the tangent here, but I think that's sort of the myth of the genius. It's always nice to have somebody, a person that then changed things, because it's a good narrative. It makes up for good stories. That I don't know that. Elon Musk single-handedly changed the state of electric vehicles. Yes, he did a lot, but there are lots of other thinkers behind, and maybe lots of his business partners are also super smart. He's just the face of this movement in a way. Yeah, and I think people like simple stories, and that's why this happens. It's easier for us to digest, and I guess it's sort of a compression we do because our minds are not, capable enough. We don't process a lot of information. Some studies show that we're processing about 10 bits per second, which is nothing, right? It's nothing. And our output capability is even worse. I mean, you can, I think, utter up to 150 words per minute if you're fast. You maybe 180, and Claude Shannon, he said that one word is about 12 bits, so you're about 2,000 bits per second, which is nothing if you think about it. So a computer, my switch router at home can go up to 1 gigabit per second. So 2 kilobit versus 1 gigabit. So computers are massively faster. So in that sense, yeah, it's I think I got off the tangent, but I guess humans. They like this, and they like the simple stories. And because we are a bit too slow, we tend to simplify things. And it's easier to have one person do something than have many people do one thing. It's just an easier story to tell.
So, how do you navigate the ethical dimensions of AI in health, especially when it comes to data?
Well, that's a pretty hard question. I don't know if I'm the ideal person to talk about this. One thing that we as a company are trying to do is to make sure that the data stay with the person who generated them. And of course, now we all know that lots of companies are after our data because they monetize them, and lots of services are free because of that. I mean, we know that we are the product, and we got to be very critical. So there is one is data ownership, and what we do, we say always the ownership is with the person who generated the data. And the other thing, that we do, I don't know, it's not always done. We try not to store any personal data. There are different types of data. If I now know that you have a cell phone with you and it's all anonymized, I don't know it's you that is carrying the cell phone, and I do a study of your walking patterns, I think that's fine, because I don't know who generated the data. But if I can go back and then use that data to infer some kind of behavioral patterns and then use that to manipulate you, and that brings me back to the topic of algorithmic manipulation, that's not a good thing, not something we would like to have. So one is data ownership. Then the other thing is, where are these data stored? Are we allowed to sell this data? Are we just data processors? They're super important questions. I think, and AI itself then, of course, because the dream is that AI will be intelligent, then in a way it can end up manipulating you by using that information. That's sort of a scary thought. Mm-hmm. So, there is, of course, and the other thing is also about explainability. Once this data end up somewhere, let's say I use OpenAI to do some research, I could type, my knee is swollen, I fell this morning from the bicycle, what shall I do? We have to be aware of the fact that information will be sent somewhere, and they know pretty much who we are. And so that's stored somewhere, and once it's stored, it will be there forever, more or less. And the analogy I always make, with social media, it's probably clearer. If you post something on Instagram, it's like you would be posting that thing in the main station in Zurich. Everybody can see it. Do you want that? It's up to you. And I think that's also a funny thing in our society, that we are very concerned about data ownership and data, but many people end up using Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. That's sort of silly. Start with that and then start worrying about the data you generate on a robotic personal trainer. And I have endless discussions about this. And sometimes one would have to start with the basics, then move up. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, what I'm also very scared is that now there's so much content, also video content of people. And then obviously now us doing this podcast, everyone can use our voices now, I guess. I'm very scared about all of these deep fakes that are, just floating around in the internet. And I'm really scared that at some point you will not be able to tell the difference anymore. I feel like already now it's very hard to tell the difference between something that's just generated and something that's real. So I'm really wondering in what direction that will go.
Yeah, and that's super scary. One topic that is very important in the healthcare space is the one of evidence-based medicine. That's typically medicine that is backed by serious scientific studies. You have randomized control trials and so on and so forth. And even that is being challenged because there is we are overloaded by scientific publications. So you will be able to find something and the opposite of something. So, and of course, if you try to sell in the health space, ideally, whatever treatment you're exposed to should have some scientific backing. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe, people go research but you find always both sides. It's super hard, and I don't think it's easy to be a human being nowadays because we are really overloaded. And some of this information is also automatically generated, and some information then goes through echo chambers and is amplified. Some others, which maybe is relevant and more truthful, is then subdued. So I don't know. It's kind of hard. And I think the skill that we should, educate our kids or young people like you is to really think critically. And, fact-checking is one thing one should always do. That's really essential. But even that, is hard. But I think if you really think deeply about things, you will become, let's say, your senses will become much better at discriminating between what is likely true and what is not true. And I think that's a survival skill nowadays. Otherwise, you end up believing anything, and then, I don't know, that's kind of dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe to change the topic a little bit, because you touched upon how you are helping people with DD. And longevity is also a really big topic nowadays. And I remember from your last speech, you were also talking a little bit about Healthspan versus lifespan. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And then also maybe tell us some insights that you have gained throughout the years? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, essentially, if you think of healthcare itself, there are some alarming stats. So what we know is that we are getting older as a society, which is nice. On average, we have gained, as I remember correctly, in the last 6 years, about 20 years of life span. This means so let's say in the 60s, people men or women, I'll average it now, will probably get up to 60, 65. Now we're getting to 80, 85 years of age, which is nice. But we don't do this in a healthy fashion. And that's sort of the difference between lifespan, how long you live, and healthspan, how long you live in a healthy state. And by healthy state, I mean cognitively healthy, very important, physically healthy, emotionally healthy. can you manage your emotions? And maybe integrated in a friendly and happy and joyful social fabric. These are all things that matter. And 50% of our lives are actually spent in an unhealthy state. That's sort of the stats. And this has been researched many times. It's an unbelievable statistics, and many people enter in a state of denial. It cannot be. It's not true. But if you look around and start asking, lots of people have lots of problems. Starting from the age of 60, 6 out of 10 people need to take medications, and not just a painkiller because your head hurts because you had a party the day before, but heavy duty stuff. And sometimes they end up taking cocktails of medications. And the implication is that lots of money is spent on healthcare, which has been labeled also sick care. It's about $10 trillion, which is a big number. If you think now of the United States, I think the GDP is about $28 trillion. China is around 10. It's or 12, I don't remember, or 20, I don't remember. But it's a big number. If it were a country, I think it would be the third largest country, $10 trillion. And 90% of this $10 trillion is actually spent on lifestyle issues, stuff you can change.
For sports.
Whatever, yes. So, and that's where now the newly sort of established field of longevity steps in. Said, okay, if we know we can change stuff, what can we change? And most of the stuff we can change, actually, if you talk to your grandmother, she'll tell you exactly the same stuff. It's lifestyle stuff, like you should sleep a bit more, don't sleep for hours, it's not so healthy for your brain. You should move a bit more, don't sit around all the time, you should try to eat healthy, you should try to, have a more or less stressful life without stress, avoid stress, and so on and so forth. But of course, that doesn't really sell. Doesn't give you a lot of, of course, we know that. What else can I do? And so now longevity has grown into a huge field. They're projecting, I think it's going to be a $50 billion market in 2030. It's big. It's growing very quickly annually, where there is the promise of extending your healthy lifespan by years or decades, by supplements, by things like cryo chambers, by things like, red light therapy and so on and so forth. What we are trying to do is basically to shift from treatment to prevention, to shift from sick care to health care by helping people just to move better and more and be aware of what movement can do for them. And the story as told before about Barbara, patient zero, shows that a little bit. She has a chronic disease. She realized that actually by moving a bit more, by doing some strength training, she can keep her disease sort of at bay and lead a healthier life. And if you think now, I had brought some slides, but I cannot show them. But if you think, maybe just for the ladies here, this is the way to be. Life, what it is essentially, is something that's starting from 60, the quality of your life decreases quite rapidly. And if you make an effort, you can keep actually your health, your cognitive, your physical, your emotional health quite longer and compress the state of morbidity. And the way we do this essentially with different means. One is to basically tell you what is your state. It's a sort of a screening, a testing. And we don't test exotic stuff. We just test your ability to move.
Mm-hmm. So you're only focused on movement, right? Or
yes.
Do you also have a questionnaire where when you take them in, you ask them about their sleep, diet, and stress levels?
No, our approach is extremely data-driven. So it's movement, but always coupled. And that goes back to my origin as an embodied AI person. It's always coupled to the state of your brain or your cognitive state. So the tests we do are always looking at movement. We call this the neuromotor aspects of movement, like strength, power, the ability to move fast, speed, muscular endurance, coordination, precision of movement. And then also the neurocognitive aspects, how, and this will be things like executive functions, the ability to concentrate, the ability to not to be distracted too often, the ability to focus, your short-term memory. All these things, they deteriorate with age or through disease. And by taking care of them, you can keep up the state quite high for a long time, but you have to take care of them. And another funny thing about society is that typically, at least the average male of my age takes care more of their car. You have a nice car, go to the Mac, and you spend up, a lot of money for leasing than for their health. But actually should be the opposite. So, and, what we do with our technology, we do two things. One, we raise awareness. Something is not exactly anymore right. This means then you would say, okay, I could do this and this. And then we empower people. We tell them what to do. And I think there, tools like robot trainers can be very, very helpful because they're easy to use. You don't need a lot of knowledge. And I was mentioning before, we are trying to reduce the asymmetry. So it's not the person that tells you what's wrong with you and reads a lot of weird numbers that nobody understands. I mean, if you did a blood analysis, it's rather complicated. And in the end, it's all about function. So can I still ride my bicycle? Can I still ride my motorbike at high speeds? And Peter Attia, one of the, gurus in this space, Peter Attia, MD, who wrote actually a very good book, he talks about the marginal decade or the centenarian decathlon. So a good way of thinking about it is, what would I like to do when I'm 90? So my case, I'd like to be able to ride my bicycle still up a steep hill. And if possible, I'd like to be able to drive. I like driving cars. I'd like to drive my car fast, which requires a lot of cognitive skills. Of course, you're sitting, so you're essentially physically, you don't have to be really fit, but cognitively, yes. And so I need to prepare for that now. I'm now 52, so yes, it's far away, 90 or 95, whatever, or 80 or whatever it is, but I need to prepare for that now. Not when I'm 80 or 82. That's going to be too late. And I think that's a good analogy. And this starts with knowing yourself and with measuring where you are. That's the beginning. And that's where technology comes in. That's where technology becomes useful, because it's a way of understanding yourself better. Okay?
And what are some interventions or things that you now have implemented since you've decided where you want to be at 90 in your everyday life?
Me personally, I that's something I do now again more frequently. I mean, essentially, if you look at the literature or the super gurus, if you look just at movement, there are three things you ought to do. One is you have to keep your cardiovascular health. This means, be able to run, if possible, if your knees and your hips don't hurt. People at my age already have quite a lot of problems, back, knee, and hip. So I try to use my bicycle when I can, and I try to go running at least once a week. That's definitely one thing I do. The second thing that the literature says, try to keep your muscle mass. That's one thing that we know will decrease with time, starting from the age of 30. And, it's even if it's 1% or 1.5% per year, when you're 70, you lost a lot of muscle mass, maybe 50 or 60%. And muscle mass is just sort of what you see. But what will happen is that you will lose. And that's called sarcopenia, by the way, if you're sick. If you're, sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass due to disease or aging. And that's bad. But the problem is then related to function, because loss of muscle mass will most likely mean that you will lose strength. This means you're less strong, and that's what they're measuring with rib strength sensors and so on and so forth. And that's called dynapenia. And now new evidence shows that then affects your power output, moving fast. And as you might know, most of the old people don't move very fast anymore, but the one that gets to 100, they quite move. There are a few heroes out there on Instagram. They're 100 or 105. They still can move fast, or maybe even run. That's great. Or jump. And that's called powerpenia. And my goal is to keep up, my muscle mass as high as possible, as long as possible, and And that, of course, means that I need to do strength training. And this means I try to go to the gym at least 3 times a week to keep that muscle mass. And the third aspect is more about stability and flexibility. And of course, yoga is a very hot topic, especially with young ladies, or not so young ladies also. And stability, that means you sort of, I call that proprioception. It means the ability to feel your body. And our system, our technology can do all these 3 things. You can keep up your cardiovascular health, or cardiometabolic health. You can keep up your strength, power, and if done properly, you can also keep up your stability. And all these things together will then hopefully lead to a healthier life in the long term. Okay?
So far, you've been doing a lot of pilot projects, as you told me once, with hospitals and other institutes. Do you think that we'll see one of your robot trainers at home as well?
That's a super question. So, as a company, we are in the B2B market, basically business to business. We are selling just to professionals. We do have a few customers that purchase these systems for their homes. Currently, the technology is too expensive for the average home user. So, of course, if you can afford a car, you could afford what we make. But I guess in the mind of people, cars have a higher utility at the moment still. What I can imagine happening is that such machines could be shared by home users. If you have in a neighborhood, you have 10 apartments, and then you share one of these robots. That I could imagine it could be very viable proposition.
How long is a training session on average?
20 minutes twice a week.
Wow, okay.
But as I'm mentioning before, it's not the only thing you should do. It should be also always complemented by many other things. And I don't remember the WH numbers by heart, but there is a certain amount of time you should move every day. I don't remember, maybe 45 minutes or whatever. And, that's those 20 minutes are not enough. But it's one important part. And I think because it's data-driven, you will see where you are, and it will compare your performance with the one of other people of your age. And ideally, this should give you motivation to do something. And I do this actively. I always do the test. So we are measuring something called muscle age, which is a quite good number. Not everybody likes that number because sometimes the system estimates that you're maybe 10 years older than you effectively are. Hey, that's reality. I think I know the algorithms are well implemented, so I think it's a good number, and it's a realistic number you can use as a reference. And I'm 100% convinced that if you make effort and you're able-bodied, of course, that you can improve those numbers. And hopefully this will lead to more motivation to take care of your health.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if one day somebody would come up to you and say, I want to build a gym just solely based on your robot trainers, that would be a B2B business too.
Yeah, so we actually have these kind of requests. We can sell our tech. So we just for the audience, we have essentially, we simplify essentially the training of the human body and mind. We have 2 systems, one for the upper extremities. This means arms, torso, back, chest, and one for the lower extremities. This means your legs, and always in a full movement. So coupled, they can train your whole body. And we sell these 2 robot trainers in a concept we call the nano gym. And we have now first customers for this concept. And the idea is that in a very small space, you can basically implement this nano gym. You just need 6 square meters. It's not a lot of space. And in this room, you could have 2 nano gyms, or 3 even. So, and it's fully data-driven. It's empowering. In a way, I would say it compresses space and time. It's very efficient, the training. I think it's economic. Of course, you have an initial cost of the technology, but if you think of A, the time you're saving, and B, the costs that you will have if you don't do anything. It's actually economic. And the third one is it's efficient. So in German, the criteria for good physical therapy are Wirtschaftlichkeit, Zweckmäßigkeit und Wirksamkeit. And it's these three criteria we fulfill with no problems. I mean, full mark. But it's a robot. It can provide this type of therapy autonomously, theoretically even without human intervention, because it embeds the knowledge of many, many physical therapists. There are many different plans already built in for most of the sort of common pathologies or diseases, which makes it a nice proposition. And why this is important, because if you look at physical therapy as a space, there are essentially two big challenges. One is we are running out of qualified personnel in physical therapy. So physical therapy is a very hard job. So typically you get your half an hour with the physical therapist, and to be profitable, a physical therapist needs to treat between 14 and 16 patients a day. That's really hard, because it's not just cutting your hair and talking a little bit. It's really, you have to really understand deeply this person. Some people have really, really deep problems. So it's hard mentally, but also hard physically. So, and of course, it's not like a job everybody wants to do. And society is getting older. And so they're projecting that, let's say in 5 to 10 years, there will be maybe 100,000 therapists. In Germany, there will be 100,000 therapists, which will be lacking. In Switzerland, maybe 10 to 15,000. So one solution is to import the physical therapists, but that's also hard because, maybe some people from other countries don't speak Swiss German, and, people want to be spoken to in Swiss German here in Zurich, and that's one problem. So there, probably machines can help solve this problem by working together with a physical therapist, not replacing them, but augmenting them, speed up, or do stuff they don't really want to do, or documenting stuff. The second problem is the lack of standardization. So the big step, if you think of Henry Ford, cars, the big thing was standardization in making cars. That's why cars became so cheap. And we, of course, now we push it to the extreme with robots in factory floors, which basically are designed for one purpose only, make stuff very fast and very precisely, always the same. And that happens in factories. And now that robots are getting out of these factories, maybe in a physical therapy center, we can start standardizing therapy. And this means treatment on the one hand, that when a patient, for example, has to recover from an injury, and that injury is ACL rupture, then we do this. Not this and this, but this. And the robot already knows, because very smart people, very smart therapists and scientists implemented that routine. You click and it does it for you. It starts with that, and then it notices, Kiana, she's actually a bit weak there. Maybe I'll change something. And it personalizes automatically, because it will know you better than anybody else, because it's measuring all the time. 1,000 times per second. Robots are measuring super fast. No human can keep up with that. And that's back to the topic of bandwidth I mentioned before. Robots can work at a much faster pace, and they have all this knowledge about you while you're moving, and they can then slightly change those plans and make plans perfectly suitable and tailored for you. And it's not difficult to imagine that then the physical therapy session will be more efficient and more effective, because it's yours. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. This enrages me when I go out and I hear famous people in Zurich that do healthcare talk about one-size-fits-all. I really get angry, because we are in the 21st century. We are in a data-driven society. We talk about the quantifiable cells. We have enough tools to measure a lot of stuff. Robots are 1,000 times faster than you are. Just let it go. Just use that information and let the robot do its job. You as a human are responsible for the emotions. You as a human, you have to take care of the patient, have to know his birth date ideally, and maybe ask him about his family or her, and care. You have to care deeply. And I think that's lacking because of the high stress of physical therapy, it becomes very transactional, everything. And healthcare should be interaction. It should be interaction between a human and a human. And the robot does what it does best. And they used to say dirty, dull, and dangerous, the 3 Ds of robotics. And maybe with physical therapy it will be the dumb stuff. Putting the weights and thinking of what did this person do last time? How shall I change the plan? Look, the movement was not perfect. Maybe I should adapt that. Forget it. The robot is much better. It knows much more than you will ever know. And it just works 24/7, 365. So, and this will lead then to more standards. And that's a second big problem. So the lack of standards. And I think with this technology, we can solve both. But there has to be more I think what we are lacking is like a mindset where people understand. So robotics, or in my case, robotic personal training, didn't have a ChatGPT moment yet. So it's not out there and people say, wow, this is really cool. But I'm hopeful that this will happen, because probably in 5 to 10 years, there will be not enough physical therapists. And we already know now some of our customers are really, really at the limit with their time. And, they're only humans. So the only solution will be either to hire more people, but they're not enough, or to reduce the number of people you can take care of. This means you have to reduce, you'll have to say no to some customers.
And you won't be profitable anymore?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one way out of this impasse is using physical AI in a way. See, and that's why I'm very excited about this. Just to go back, the cognitive AI had its ChatGPT moments. It's out there. Many of us are using it daily. Not only ChatGPT. I'm in software engineering. We're using this for coding. You're probably going to use it for editing this text, maybe to cut out my and
No, we won't.
But you could.
We could, yeah.
Yes, and it will be okay. But physical AI still needs this moment. So and just to say last thing. So if you think now of the space, what we are doing is we are into sort of collaborative robotics. So originally, the robots of the 60s and 70s were pretty stupid and dumb, and they were doing this stuff all the time mindlessly. Now the robots are getting out, and there are different levels of interacting with humans. So of course, and one level would be, the robot coexists in the same space with humans. And it could be now a robot that cleans the floor here. It's here, but we don't touch it, especially if it's big and dangerous. And, the robots that are at the airport, maybe you saw them, they are cleaning the floor at the airport. I think it's cool. That's sort of level 1. Then you have level 2, where humans and robots share a workspace. And, one robot, for example, takes a box and the humans put something in the box. That's a sequential type of interaction. And then there will be, that's level 3. Then level 4 will be where humans and robots work together simultaneously. And I think we're already at level 5 because as a company, and I'm really proud of that, we have people who are really, who have real pathologists who actually you would think, this person shouldn't be using a machine, a robot by him or herself, but they're using it. And by using it, their quality of life increases drastically and they're really happy about it. And this is amazing, I think. And I think this is really a nice thing about, the human-machine interaction. And I have a lot of pictures with people who smile like crazy after using these robots. The games make them happy because it's highly gamified. They have moments of success where their score is higher of the one of a top athlete. And they can't have enough of it. And as we know from fitness training is the number of repetition make a difference. And good fitness training is work to the limit. Don't stop before that. Of course, I can't do that, but we know the theory, theoretically, right? You always have to go sort of to the limit or before failure, it's called, the rep to failure kind of approach. And that's true. That really works well. And the best bodybuilders do this all the time, back to muscle mass and strength. And athletes can do that, but a normal person can't do that. So you need a trick. And the trick is gamification. A trick is comparison with others. And the robots implements that trick. And I think that's sort of a coherent story for the future where humans and machine can coexist and in the same space, but at the same time, the machine can really help human lead better life. And, back to tech and thrive, that would be the sort of scenario, the story, the narrative. Because, what is there more than health? Mental health, emotional health, or physical health? That's what we all want. I don't care about the 20 seconds video, TikTok videos or Instagram pictures, people showing their pictures from their holidays in Rhodes or whatever. I don't really care, but I care if somebody's healthy. And I care because healthy people have the tendency to be happier. And if people around you are happy, this makes you happier. It's a very simple feedback cycle, and that should be, in my view, if I had a magic wand, I think it's the idea just instill people with more happiness, because, what is there in life apart from that? We are anyway lucky that we are here. And of course, people are struggling with their daily lives. But I think, and that's my experience, if your mindset is a positive mindset, you'll get positivity back. I think that's really true. And I've had days where I was really negative and I got a lot of negativity back. In the worst case, I even had an accident happen to me. You end up, something happens, you get a stupid email. I go to the gym, I do a stupid move, and I injure my shoulder. And then you go out with the motorbike. This is a true story. And then I fall from the motorbike and I break the motorbike. I injure my knee. Everything the same day.
Yeah, it's the negativity loop.
This happens.
Yeah,
right?
It's true.
It's kind of funny. Anyway, again, off a tangent. But I hope I answered your question. I don't remember what it was.
I think you gave us a lot of really wonderful insights, and it's super inspiring to see also how you are extremely passionate about your work. And then also, that's why we invited you when we first had our interaction. It's so beautiful to see how you exactly, as you said, implement technology in a way that helps people. And that's obviously also the mission of this show, where we want to show people who have had a positive impact somehow through technology. But then also with our work, that's what we are about with Kimia. We want to have a holistic approach to technology, but then also the human beings behind it. Thank you so much for all of your insights. We have a little closing tradition. So if you could offer one piece of advice to today's aspiring innovators or entrepreneurs, what would it be?
That's a good point. So I have a quote by Nietzsche, which I have to read, but I think it's really cool. And I changed it a little bit because I think he was a bit too chauvinistic. So, but I think it's a cool quote. He or she who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The original quote was without a she. I added that, but I think you.
Thank you for including us.
But I think it's correct. And I think if you think of aspiring entrepreneur, I think create meaning. That's the most important thing. And what makes me a bit sad is that the focus is always on cash flow, on economic metrics. And this starts with your first investor and the first business plan. Just already says it. You need the financial sheet in the end. And this steers then, I think, everything in the wrong direction. I know it's important. I'm aware of that. I know money rules the world. But in the end, this won't make you happy and won't make the people around you happy. It will probably end up in the best case, you'll become rich. But, probably not many succeed in doing that. In the worst case, it will be a very unrewarding type of experience where you just run after the next pile of money. That's why I think creating meaning is the sort of the most important thing. And if you think back, if you look at my family, I don't have any technologists in my family. They're all, I think, mechanics, farmers. I have one of my uncles sells flowers in South Italy, but he's a happy guy. He sells flowers. And if you go to his shop, which he has cared for 50 years, the smell in that shop, it's amazing. And he's like 75, looks like 50, super happy. But he creates meaning because he sells joy, flowers, unless it's for the funeral.
But then still, at least the funeral looks nice.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would focus on. The value is obvious because every investor will ask you to create value, but the meaning is not so obvious. And I think it's not so easy to do that. Will take time to figure that out. Maybe some people are very good at this. They immediately see what can create meaning. And eventually, I guess, if you can create meaning, you can create happiness. And so that should be, in my view, the ultimate vector. Because if you have that, the rest will be irrelevant. Because, you can be sort of financially not successful, but from an emotional perspective, very successful. So you have the choice. In the end, if I ask this question, what would you rather prefer? Emotional success, be happy and healthy, okay, or financially successful? Of course, people say, I need both. But more often than not, in my experience, they don't go hand in hand. There is always a trade-off. And this is the engineer in me speaking. There is always a trade-off when you do stuff. And I think in life it's the same. So at a certain point, if you become an entrepreneur, you'll have probably to make a decision what you want. And maybe make a bit less money, but be highly satisfied with what you do. And that's what is me. So as you noticed, I'm very passionate about what I do. And of course, there are many things I don't like doing. The day-to-day work of a CEO is sort of boring. And I hope I can change that soon. I'm planning for that. But I know for sure that many people using what we do at our company can profit massively from it. And this is, of course, highly rewarding. See, and sort of, I hope this summarizes it and wraps it up a little bit.
Definitely. Where can people follow you and your work and dive a little bit deeper into what we have been discussing today?
Yes, so of course I'm planning to write a book. I'm just kidding. I would love to actually.
I feel like you would be pretty good at writing a book.
I would love to write a book. I was thinking about this, maybe because I'm a middle-aged man. So then I have a motorbike, good. I have a fast car, good. I reproduced, which is good. So the next thing will be to write a book. So anyway, so where can they find us? So of course we have the usual Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn page. The company's name is Dynamic Devices. Our brand name is ddrobotec. We are the only one on the planet, so it's easy to find us. I'm a fan of LinkedIn. I think it's a good place to meet like-minded people. I'm not too much into Instagram. It's too much of a time killer for me, although it's funny sometimes. We don't have a TikTok presence. I know that's very popular among young people. You can write us emails. We are very responsive. We like interested people. We like people who share the passion for movement, health, and creating meaning. You can visit us. We are in Zurich. We have quite large locations. We do host events sometimes. We like group of students. We have a very talented brand manager, Sandra, and she knows how to organize this very well. And yeah, so it's kind of easy. Very easy to reach. So I guess we are trying to interact as much as possible. Not me, myself, I'm kind of a nerd. So, but I don't mind speaking, as you noticed. But I'm not the best at organizing stuff. But for that, we have people who are very good.
Okay? That's great. Yeah, you cannot always do everything. I feel like I love the analogy. I once heard this. It's you can look for a unicorn for a really long time, but then also you could just find, let's say, the horse part of the unicorn, the wings, and one person is the horn, and then you have 3 people, but they still are a unicorn, right? So it's probably easier to find 3 people who will together become one unicorn than finding a unicorn amongst everyone else.
This brings me maybe to the last piece of advice for entrepreneurs. I mean, if I look at my history, I think it's super important, unless you're planning to start a company by yourself. Maybe there's some very, very good people who can do that. But if you plan to work as a team, you're also very good, I think. Of course, sisters, probably each other very well. Strengths and weaknesses. I think you should try to map out sort of the different things you need at the company. So in our case, I believe, if I think back, it was not a mistake, but it made our path a bit more challenging. we didn't have a finance person on board, which of course is important. Somebody who cares about the numbers, cash in, cash out and stuff like that. So as a companies, we were very, very tech driven. We just cared about making cool stuff, or as we call it, cool shit. And the business came only afterwards. I guess if I had to start again, I'd probably have a strong technological part, but also a strong business part, because that's at least as important. Because in the end, if you don't sell, you die, unfortunately, as a company. And that's sort of the key. And in that sense, yes, so you'll need more people to form this unicorn. And probably the most successful companies in the world, with a few exceptions, had this constellation. I mean, of course, there are super genius people like Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, or Elon Musk who can do this almost alone, at least, looks like. But I'm pretty sure they also have very strong backing on the business side, because all of these people are techies, right? And so that's sort of another piece of advice. Try to find people who you like working with, who you like seeing every day.
Who complement your skills.
Yes. It's not easy. That's, I think, probably the hardest part. But I think that's super important. But you have to like them. It's super important, because it will be starting a company is really hard. I mean, it's not as hard as, some other people say. But it's hard, and you are trading off a lot of your time, because you will spend much more time with your company maybe than with other things you like. But it can be very rewarding, because you are in the driver's seat. You do more or less what you want. You can talk. You can take decisions, which is nice. If you work for a big company, you probably won't have that possibility. Maybe somebody else will take decisions for you, and for some people that's good. It's easy. In the evening, I don't have to think about my company. But if you're more an entrepreneur and you really want to create meaning and you have some good ideas, try to complement yourself, with others. I learned this very early on, by the way. And I remember a speech given at our university by a very famous guy who had spent some time at NASA. He came and gave a speech in front of 1,000 students, and he said, be a team. See, of course, you will need to know a lot, but complement yourself also with others. So be yourself a team, but also complement yourself with others that complement yourself. Being a team in a way. Okay? And yeah.
Really beautiful. Thank you so much, Max, for your time today. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear about your whole story and about your opinion on the status quo of today, and also think you inspired us too a lot into maybe reading ourselves more into robotics as well. And I'm sure that other listeners are now inspired as well.
For sure,
yeah.
yeah.
I do hope so. It would be nice. And anyway, so what will happen probably thanks to this new wave in physical AI, there will be a lot of reskilling. It's starting now. People maybe who are into software, web pages now are automated. You don't need any more web developers, or not as many. They will have to reskill themselves. And so there will be probably in the next 5 to 10 years quite a wave of people who will get into physical stuff, which is nice. Okay, good. Super.
So thanks again.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was really fun. I wish you the best of luck with your podcast. I think it's great. It's a fresh wind. I like the constellation, the 2Ks. It's really cool. You're really, really professional. Very young, but very professional already. I'm really impressed.
Thank you so much, Max.
Appreciate it. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of Tech and Thrive. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to follow us on Instagram at techandthrive_podcast and learn more about our work at kimiana.co. If you'd like to support the show or be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Just drop us a message at info@kimiana.co. And until next time.